Have you ever felt like your soul is too tired to even cry? Like your body might still be moving, but your mind just can't take it anymore? Then this story is for you. But before you think it's just another video with pretty words, I want to make you an invitation. Stay until the end, because what you're going to hear here isn't just a story, it's a journey. And somewhere along the way there is a forgotten psalm, a psalm that heals, but it won't be revealed now. First, you'll understand why it was written, and why maybe it was written for you. It all began in a hospital room, but the patient wasn't her. It was her husband, and the one suffering in silence, standing tall, was her. Mrs. Lucille, a 67-year-old evangelical woman with white hair like cotton clouds, who had already buried 2 brothers, raised 3 children on her own, and survived cancer 20 years earlier. But now she was facing something she had never encountered before: depression. Not in the body, but in the mind, and most of all, in the soul. In the corridor of the psychiatric wing, psychologist Andrew observed. He was a young, skeptical, technical man, used to diagnoses and clinical reports, but there was something about that woman that eluded him. While other patients complained, screamed, or surrendered to silence, Lucille just smiled with sad eyes. And that intrigued him. It was on a cold morning that he first approached her with a notepad. "Is it all right if we talk a bit?" She nodded, with that calm gesture of someone who had already faced worse storms. He started with simple questions, but quickly realized it wouldn't be an ordinary session. When he asked, "Do you believe God can heal the mind?" she simply replied, "Son, some psalms are worth more than 1,000 medicines." That sentence kept echoing in Andrew's mind. Some psalms are worth more than 1,000 medicines. What did she mean by that? From that day on, he began visiting her more often, not as a psychologist, but as a student. And with every conversation, he discovered a new piece of that faith which, even bruised, had not given up on existing. What if you too are just trying to stay standing, when everything inside you only wants to lie down and give up? What if your pain isn't just physical, but emotional, mental, spiritual? If this video is reaching you right now, maybe it's because you're also at your limit. So stop for a moment, take a deep breath, and allow a new seed to be planted within you. Write your name, or the name of someone you carry in your heart, here in the comments. If you've faced or are facing an invisible battle in your mind, share your story here. Together we will form a living chain of faith, where each name becomes a prayer, each comment an act of empathy, and each gesture a breath of hope. We are not alone, and that is already the beginning of healing. In her second conversation with Andrew, Lucille revealed something she hadn't even told her children. "I started asking God to take me." The psychologist swallowed hard. "And why didn't you say this before?" She looked at him firmly. "Because no one believes it when it's the caregiver who gets sick." That hit him. For the first time, Andrew saw the invisible weight many women carry. They are everyone's strength, but inside they are in ruins. "I just wanted a place where I could say, 'Today I'm not okay,' and not hear back, 'You need to be strong.' And maybe." That's a sentence you've never said out loud either. That afternoon, after their talk, Andrew left the hospital changed. Something about that sentence wouldn't leave his mind. No one believes it when it's the caregiver who gets sick. He realized that behind the statistics and clinical charts, there were untold stories, pains that don't show up with fevers, but with silence. And for the first time, he decided to do something off protocol. He went back to Lucille's room without the notepad, just with ears and presence. She was sitting at the edge of the bed, Bible on her lap, open to a folded page. Andrew asked, "Is this the psalm you spoke of?" She replied, "Not yet. This is the one that helps me wait until I find the right one." That answer was as profound as it was unsettling. Waiting until finding the right psalm. What did that even mean? Lucille explained that ever since she was a little girl, she had always felt that each season of life was guided by a hidden verse. "The Bible is alive, son, and there are words that only reveal themselves when the soul is ready." Andrew remained silent, That was far too foreign for his clinical understanding, but it held too much truth to be dismissed. In the days that followed, he began secretly reading the Bible, trying to understand what she saw in it. Not as a theologian, but as someone trying to grasp the kind of pain no antidepressant can touch. Because yes, there are wounds science cannot reach. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly where God begins to act. On one of his visits, Lucille shared a memory from her youth. She told how after losing her first child, it felt like her life had been split in two. I kept asking, God, how can you allow this? And the only answer I received was silence. But it was in that silence that he began to rebuild me. Andrew asked how it was possible to rebuild something without answers. She responded, because sometimes what heals isn't the answer, it's the presence. That phrase stayed with him for days. What heals isn't the answer, it's the presence. And what if that's exactly what's missing in your life right now? Not an explanation, but a presence that doesn't abandon you. That remains, even when everything else falls apart. The hospital faced difficult days that week. A flu outbreak among weakened patients forced the staff to double down on precautions. Visits were restricted. Lucille went days without seeing her children. Andrew noticed she had grown quieter and decided to bring something different, a small portable radio. So you can listen to hymns or sermons, he said. She smiled with her eyes. You didn't have to, but thank you. That night, the radio played softly, filling the room with old gospel songs. And Andrew, standing outside her door, heard one for the first time. Hold on to God's hand and go. He didn't catch every word, but he felt its impact. It was as if those lyrics were purifying the hospital air. It was in that atmosphere that a new patient arrived in the ward. A young woman named Emily, just 23 years old, admitted after a suicide attempt. Lucille watched everything unfold from her window, eyes full of compassion. She doesn't need advice right now. She needs a gaze that doesn't judge. Andrew heard those words and felt something shift inside. He realized that until then, he had seen his patients through a clinical lens, not through the heart. 2 days later, while Emily was walking through the corridor, she paused at Lucille's door. Without saying a word, the young woman asked, "Have you ever wanted to disappear too?" Lucille answered only with a gesture. She opened her arms. Emily rushed into that embrace and cried as if she had been needing it for years. And in that silent encounter, a bridge was built between two generations marked by pain. But what neither of them knew was that the psalm was about to be revealed. And what if you two were just one conversation away from the comfort your soul so desperately longs for? Sometimes the answer you're searching for comes in the hug you choose to offer. The next morning, the mood in the ward was different. Emily, who once wandered the hallways with her head down, was now helping the coffee volunteers set up breakfast trays. Lucille watched everything from afar, with a quiet smile. Andrew approached as he did every day, but this time with a different question. "Do you believe God also heals the mind, not just the body?" Lucille answered firmly. "Of course. The heart pumps the blood, but the mind sustains the soul. When the mind breaks, everything collapses, and that's where the psalm comes in." Andrew froze. The psalm. It was back again. "Which psalm?" he asked. Lucille didn't answer. She simply picked up her Bible and said, "Today I found it. Not because I was searching, but because it found me." She opened the marked page and began to read, slowly, her voice trembling but full of peace. "Hear my cry, O God. Attend unto my prayer. From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee when my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I." Psalm 61, 1-2. Andrew couldn't hold back the emotion. Those words pierced through his defenses. When my heart is overwhelmed. That was exactly it. The feeling of being internally collapsed, barely holding on, yet still crying out. And not crying for explanations. Crying for a rock, for a place higher than the pain. A place of refuge. In that moment, something shifted inside him. This wasn't just a patient. She was a messenger, and that wasn't just a page in the Bible. It was a mirror reflecting everything he himself needed to hear. Lucille explained that this psalm was her God psychologist, because it listens, and when you put into words what hurts, even if it's just a whisper, that's already the beginning of healing. Andrew remembered the silent sessions he had led so many times, where patients didn't even know how to start, and he thought, maybe sometimes all someone really needs to hear is, God still listens. Have you ever read this psalm out loud? Maybe today is the time. Maybe right now what you need is just this, to remember there is a rock, higher than your pain, more stable than your thoughts, more faithful than your fear. That revelation touched Emily too. Lucille shared the psalm with her, handwritten on a folded piece of paper. Emily taped it to the hospital bathroom mirror. That night she posted online, "Today I found a rock when everything inside me was collapsing. Psalm 61 found me." The post went viral. Hundreds of comments flooded in. People from all over the country sharing similar stories. What was once just an ancient text became a modern comfort. That's when Andrew had an idea. He organized a small prayer circle in the hospital garden. Nothing formal, just a group of people with similar stories who needed to remember that the ground was still beneath them. Lucille was invited to open the gathering with the psalm. Emily read a part of what she had written, and Andrew, for the first time in years, prayed out loud. The prayer was simple. Lord, when the heart is overwhelmed, be the rock that holds. When the mind can't take it, be the shelter that protects. When there are no more words, hear the silence that cries out for help. And lead, Lord, each one here to a higher place, higher than the pain, higher than the fear, higher than this dark valley. Amen. And if you know someone whose heart is overwhelmed, write their name in the comments. It can be your name too. Share a story, a request, a memory. Let's build together a chain of prayer, where every name becomes a flame lit in the darkness. Each comment, a silent prayer. Each gesture, a shared hope. From that day on, Psalm 61 began appearing all over the hospital, printed on sheets of paper, in the cafeteria, at the reception desk, in patient rooms. No signature, just one sentence at the top, for those who think they can't take it anymore. And right there, a new story would begin. But what no one knew yet was that the greatest miracle was still to come. The following week, Emily was discharged. But before she left, she returned to Lucille's room. She held an envelope in her hands. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small pocket Bible with Psalm 61 marked. She said, "You didn't heal me, but you gave me hope that I can heal. And that is miracle enough." Lucille cried softly, not from sadness, but from gratitude. And Andrew? He began sharing that psalm with his new patients, not as a clinical tool, but as an embrace. A reminder that even psychologists need psychologists, and that sometimes God's psychologist speaks through ancient words that are still alive today. It was in this spirit that the hospital received a new group of patients with severe anxiety and depression disorders transferred from other facilities. Among them, a woman named Martha, 39 years old, long hair, deep eyes, a deep silence. She didn't speak. She just sat in the corridor, staring at the floor. Andrew noticed her during the first few days, but respected her time. However, something changed when she saw one of the Psalm 61 sheets posted next to the cafeteria. She stopped. She read it. She read it again. And after almost 15 minutes standing still, she simply asked, "Who wrote this?" The receptionist pointed toward the inpatient wing. Martha walked there. She found Lucille sitting down, reading a book. "Was it you?" she asked. Lucille didn't say yes, nor no. She simply smiled and replied, "It was him." And that was enough to begin a new conversation. Martha began visiting Lucille every day. She didn't speak much. Sometimes she would just sit silently. But little by little, she started sharing fragments of her pain, abandonment, crises, attempts. And in the midst of it all, one question: Why hasn't he healed me yet? Lucille, with the serenity of someone who's crossed valleys, answered, maybe he's still building you. Then she pointed to the psalm. He didn't promise instant relief. He promised a rock, solid ground, a firm place to stand. And sometimes, that's the greatest miracle. Have you ever asked why healing takes so long? Maybe that's not the question. Maybe the real question is, what is God building in you while you wait? Andrew, who had been watching from a distance, decided to invite Martha to write about her feelings. He suggested she keep a journal. At first, she refused. But a few days later, she handed him a notebook with a blue cover. I've started writing, but it's just for me and God. And that simple gesture was the beginning of a transformation. In the following weeks, Martha began to open up, to talk, to smile. She still cried. She still felt pain. But now, she carried a folded piece of paper in her pocket, already worn from being read so many times. It was Psalm 61. And every time her mind tightened, she would read it out loud, as if every word were a step toward relief. One day, Martha entered Andrew's office and said, "Can I read something to you?" He nodded. She opened her journal and read, "Today I understood that I'm not broken, I'm being rebuilt, and my soul has finally found a rock to lean on. It's not a rock that removes me from the pain, it's one that keeps me steady within it." Andrew, eyes filled with tears, replied, "You've just written what many therapists spend their whole lives trying to explain." And there, in that small consultation room, another quiet miracle took place. If you're in a moment where everything inside you seems to collapse, try writing. It doesn't have to be pretty or poetic. Write as someone who's pouring out their soul. And if possible, start with Psalm 61, because this is a psalm that listens. Meanwhile, Lucille continued her journey. She no longer had much energy. The pain came back often. Her exams showed a slow progression of illness, but there was something inside her that no one could explain, a peace that defied understanding, and it was that peace that now inspired the entire medical staff. Nurses asked her to read verses in the halls. Technicians asked for advice. Even doctors, the most skeptical ones, stopped to listen to her stories. She was no longer just a patient. She was a lighthouse. But what happens when even the lighthouse begins to dim? Lucille's last hospitalization was quiet. She didn't complain, didn't ask for anything. She would simply say now and then while looking out the window, "I've done what I needed to do here." The doctors didn't understand, but those who lived with her, they knew. They knew this was a soul that had made peace with life and with pain. It was Andrew who stayed by her side during those final days, sitting quietly beside her, holding her hand. One morning, she asked him to read Psalm 61 out loud, and he did, slowly. "From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee when my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For thou hast been a shelter for me, and a strong tower from the enemy." Lucille smiled. She said only, "This is my home now," and closed her eyes. She passed away that night, peacefully, serene. And when the nurses entered the room, they found an envelope on her nightstand. Inside it, a handwritten letter. If someone is reading this and is too tired to go on, know this: I've been there too. I also thought I couldn't take it anymore. But a psalm found me, and that rock was my shelter on days when no one else could reach me. Read Psalm 61, and if you can, read it out loud. Because even the faintest whisper, God hears. That letter was placed in the hospital chapel, and months later, another woman found it. Her name was Alicia. She was accompanying her son through treatment for a rare cancer. She was at her limit, desperate. When she read the letter, she began to cry uncontrollably. She went out to the hospital garden, pulled out her phone, searched for Psalm 61, and for the first time in weeks, she prayed. And what if what sustains one life becomes the refuge of another? And what if your pain today is exactly the seed of hope for someone you don't even know. Alicia was one of dozens of people who wrote in the comments of a video, inspired by this story. There, she wrote, "I didn't know Lucille, but I found her story at the moment I needed it most. My son survived. But inside, I almost didn't. Thank you wherever you are. And this is where our story reaches you. Now I invite you, close your eyes for a moment, take a deep breath, and listen to this prayer. A prayer inspired by words that have traveled across generations and continue healing hearts to this day. Prayer of refuge. Lord, when my mind gets lost among voices of fear, lead me to the higher rock. When my heart faints in the middle of the night, hide me in your shelter. When everything feels dark, guide me with the light of your promise. Let my faith not collapse. Let my soul not drown. Let my name be written in the palm of your hands, and may this pain today find a greater purpose. Amen. If this prayer touched your heart, write your name or the name of someone you love in the comments. Share your story, your request, or your gratitude. Let's build together a living chain of faith, where each name becomes a prayer, each comment becomes hope, and each gesture becomes a breath of miracle. This isn't just Lucille's story. It's the story of all who carry invisible pain, who face silent battles, and who, even so, remain standing. And if you've made it this far, know this: Psalm 61 didn't appear by chance. It was prepared to find you at this very moment. It is the answer that comes before the healing, the refuge before the escape, the rock before the relief. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. May these words be your anchor today, and if you believe this message can touch other lives, share this video. Send it to someone who is tired, who is fighting in silence. Maybe for that person, Psalm 61 will be the first breath after days of suffocation. And remember, God still uses stories to reach hearts, and maybe He's using yours right now.